We are waiting for a few more folks to arrive, so I think we will start with our opening prayer. So I will introduce Elder Donna Augustine. She is with us today from Elsie Booktook First Nation. So Elder Donna, would you care to opening up our session today with opening prayer?
Sure. Thank you, Val. Yes, very honored to be doing this. I'm going to be lighting that smudge in a minute, and I just want to tell you that I need this smudge just as much. My son, he's got an old pickup truck that he bought, and it gave him problems right from the start. And now the garage is paid over $3,000, and they still can't fix it. And anyway, I'm just going to help him whichever way I can. He's my son with cystic fibrosis, and so his name is Mcintosh, which means little bear. So it's like the mother bear in me kicks in when somebody gives them a hard time. But I'll just help them. That's all, you know. So I need this smudge too. So I'm going to introduce myself to you with my spirit name. I just told you in the language, my Mi'kmaq language. My spirit name is Thunderbird Turtle Woman, and I'm from the northeast coast of what we call Turtle Island. You know, when you think back, our ancestors, there was no U.S.-Canadian border. There were not even any provinces, so our ancestors were able to travel freely. And so I just kind of acknowledge that when I say, because North America, we refer to it as Turtle Island. So I'm going to light a small smudge. And what that smudge does, it purifies our spirit, and it prepares us for something. Everything important that we do, we usually light that smudge, and that prayer is offered. So I'm going to offer this to the Creator, the spirits of the four directions, which includes the spirits of our ancestors, the ones that went before us. Mother Earth. And I'm going to symbolically offer this medicine to all of you out there, spiritually, that this medicine will travel to you. And as in our way, we make that offering of tobacco. And JEDI already sends me tobacco, and it's protocol, but also when that tobacco is offered, it's actually an offering for the spirits. And so every time we pick our medicines, before we do anything, when our fishermen go to fish, they offer tobacco to that water. It's like asking permission. Before we pick our medicines, we place our tobacco on the ground to honor the spirit of that medicine. And so the tobacco is very symbolic, not only to our tribes here, our First Nations here in the East, but all the way out west and all the way throughout Turtle Island. So I'm going to offer that prayer on behalf of all of us. We're going to offer that prayer to the Creator, to the spirits of the four directions, starting with the East, because we are here in the East, and we are the people of the dawn. We have a confederacy, the Wabanaki Confederacy. And so then I offer that to clockwise to the south direction, the west direction, which is this place of our ancestors, the north, and then to Mother Earth. And just to give thanks and to ask for that guidance in our words, and so that our minds, our spirits are opening to receiving the messages that are going to be offered today. How Chibanuk Chamisha Leo to Nadio, Archijamish Gipuda Leo Nadio, the Lascarla Demawe, Dr. Manegisco, Chugidano Chijamish Kilotio, Teo to Nadio. Mawi died, Kilokalankida Swan, close one Chibadin, Narin and Kamlama, Tilmina, and a wallite of the Piat of Sokoi, Olalia. How Kades no Chamisha Leo to Nadio, Archijamish Evi can Leo Nadio. Lascarla Demawe, Wallali go Genego, Dandel with a task mamino. Wallali go Chilamkas way to mountain Dampakis of the Uchimi Machuno. Dr. Magisco, Tepi item Sokoi. Kilo Kankidaso and a close one, Jabadin and Diego. Oh. Hard Kisnuk, Sawa Kamiskishna in Naknosit Nadal Nanagos at what I said the last Carla de Maui. And what I teach Cleocho Nadia, Chugidano. Kiloko goes what Nakidaswa and Juarian and Danudo de Gisco. Well, I licked out a vex of tear. Atlamonemo, well, I lick never than the Yaku. Ha, or I'd not Jamish and looked at Nadia. I Jamish for big wind and laying Nadia. The last Carla de Maui. Well, I got it nego, Tandilin went Tasmamina. I Jamish for big wind. Well, I licked Tandilin went Tasmamina, than you didn't immediate, Tilnina a Kamlamina. Well, I lick. Hagishnamiko, well, I Kishamako, Svaginamuyak, Sangwan, Gundal, Minishko, Weesisk, Mimesh, Kapsakodami magic. Well, I Kishnamako, Giskuk, and Kamiadi, Balatan, Ha, Sunogama. All my relations, for we are all related. Aho.
Wonderful. Well, Alan, Elder Donna, for your opening prayer and your kind words. So again, welcome everyone to JEDI's May 2021 virtual plenary, Building Better Together 2. My name is Val Polchis. I am the Communications Officer for the Joint Economic Development Initiative. I'm here with several of my colleagues, Acting CEO Stanley Barnaby, Communication Manager Gwen McIntyre, Summer Intern Connor Bear, Communications Intern Lori Nash, Samantha McClellan, she's our Provincial Indigenous Employment Coordinator. Ian Daly is here. So welcome everyone. I would like to take this time to do a territorial acknowledgement. So I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik people. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which Wolastoqiyik peoples first signed with the British Crown in 1725. The treaties do not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognize Wolastoqiyik title and establish the rules that was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. Also like to acknowledge, the Mi'kmaq territory as well, as some of you are probably in those territories, as well as our friend from Ontario, Sean, I believe he's in Mohawk territory, correct me if I'm wrong. So welcome everyone. So with that being said, I'd just like to cover a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. So I do ask that everyone, if possible, to share your beautiful faces and turn on your cameras. I do ask that everyone mute their mics. We have some features here. If you do have some questions, we have at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a menu panel, and there's a reactions button with a raise hand feature. So if you have any questions, please feel free to use that feature. Or there's also a chat box, which is also available for any questions for anyone here. You can click on the blue button that says everyone, and you can message specific people privately if you wish to do so. But please feel free to use those features. And once we acknowledge you, you can unmute your mic and ask any questions. We will be breaking at about 2 p.m. I believe, for a short break. Yeah, so that covers that. So I will pass it over to our acting CEO, Stanley Barnaby, to for some welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Val, and Malal and Elder Donna for the opening prayer today. Always appreciate your opening to our meetings. And I'd like to start today on, on behalf of the Joint Economic Development, I'd like to welcome you to JEDI's virtual plenary, Building Better Together Part 2. For those of you who may not know who I am, my name is Stanley Barnaby. I am currently the acting CEO at the Joint Economic Development Initiative, or JEDI for short. In 2017, JEDI held a plenary on reconciliation where we held a very large blanket exercise, discussed some of the TRC's calls to action, and launched our current reconciliation awareness module. In 2019, we held a plenary called Building Better Together, where we focused on the relationship building, Indigenous economic development, and best practices in Indigenous communities. JEDI created reports on each of these plenaries, and because those topics are continually evolving, we need to revisit them regularly to make sure that we are making progress and heading in the right direction. This 3-webinar series will focus on some of the key points both of these previous events. At JEDI, we believe that education is the first step in reconciliation. In order to do better, you have to know better. Our reconciliation awareness training and our plenaries have always been about knowledge sharing and education. You need to build a foundation of knowledge so that you don't repeat the mistakes of the past. Once you have the educational base, you can make real strides towards relationship building. Relationships are key to working better together. All people need to feel heard. That applies to you, me, regardless of our race. When people don't feel heard and understood, then it is difficult to make progress. Indigenous peoples do not need saviors, they need partners. Strong and healthy relationships should make each partner feel valued. Outreach should be authentic and positive. Real relationships are built over time and require dedicated effort until they become natural and easy. Understanding the needs and wants of Indigenous peoples and their communities can help everyone work together to solve issues and create opportunities. Today, we will discuss 2 important pieces related to working together and moving forward in partnership: education and allyship. Our education piece will focus on the peace and friendship treaties, land claims, and title claims. We are pleased to have Chief Patricia Bernard join us and share her expansive knowledge on these subjects. Before becoming chief, Patricia worked for the federal government in the specific claims branch in Ottawa and in governance and registration in Amherst with Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada from 2000 to 2006. Chief Patricia has a degree in education and law and was called to the New Brunswick Bar in 2000. We're looking forward to hearing from her insights on these topics shortly. Our second session will feature a panel of some of our partners who believe in reconciliation and are taking active steps to implement it in their workplace. Studies have shown that diversity and inclusion can improve workplace satisfaction, employee retention, creativity, and even productivity, and these organizations are doing their best to take steps to break down barriers. Our panelists that are joining us are continually learning and putting in the work to make reconciliation happen. They aren't doing it by leaps and bounds, but through small steps, open hearts, and welcoming hands. Next week on May 25th and May 27th, JEDI will really focus on the results of our Building Better Together plenary. We will have the opportunity to review the outcomes of the event and continue the conversation. By the end of day 3, we'll have pieced together some of the actions that we can take as a whole to help move our outcomes forward. In order to have a real reconciliation, we need champions of the cause and we need everyone to do their part. If you had not had the chance to sign up for May 25th and 27th, I encourage you to do so now. We will share the link in the chat. We need everyone's input and participation to continue to build better together. Before we get started, I'd like to offer a sincere thank you to our special guests who are joining us to speak today. They have taken the time out of their busy schedules, and we really appreciate that they can be here today to share their wisdom and knowledge. On behalf of the JEDI Board of Directors and staff, I would like to thank our funders, the Government of Canada, the Government of New Brunswick, and I would also like to thank all of the chiefs and their councils of the Woodstickway and the Mi'kmaq Territory who support JEDI and our initiatives. We have all worked together for the benefit of Indigenous peoples in New Brunswick. Our vision of full Indigenous participation in the Brunswick economy is still a work in process, but I know through continued hard work and collaboration, we can get closer to that goal every year. Finally, JEDI would like to thank you all for joining us today. Wiliwin, Willalin, mercy, and thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that welcome, Stan. And again, thank you everyone for being here today. Also wanted to introduce Chloe Lee. She's joining us today from Arcasia event planning. She and her partner, Kayla Johnson, who will be joining us later, has assisted us in putting this event together today. As Stan said, this is day one of 3 sessions, and today we will be hearing from Chief Patricia Bernard of Madawaska First Nation. And in session 2, we'll be hearing from some of our great partners from MB Power, PQA Testing, Hayes Farm, and the PEDAL, so Post-Secondary Education Training and Labor. They'll be joining us for the second session today. So if anybody has any technical issues, Chloe is our girl to turn to. So please feel free to message her at any time. Yeah, so that being said, I see Patricia, Chief Patricia has joined us, and I think we can go ahead and get started, Stan.
Thanks, Val. I think I'm just going to kind of jump in before we jump into the panel with Chief Patricia. I'm just going to take a few minutes to kind of educate stakeholders on TRC calls of action. So I'll jump in right now. Thank you, Val. So just to give everyone a background on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, in 2015, they published its findings and results from 7 years of activities aimed at uncovering the truth and complexities surrounding Indian residential schools and inspiring a process of healing and reconciliation. The findings accumulated in 94 calls of action for all Canadians to act on and contribute to the process of reconciliation with Indigenous peoples across Canada. In 2017, JEDI hosted a plenary called Moving Forward to Reconciliation. The reason we decided to host that plenary was because JEDI as an organization wanted to do our part to help move certain actions forward in New Brunswick's public and private sectors. In examining the TRC's calls to action, JEDI identified 3 that aligned with our organizational mandate and that in that of our partners, numbers 7, 57, and 92. Number 7 goes as we call upon the federal government to develop with Aboriginal groups a joint strategy to eliminate educational and employment gaps between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Canadians. TRC call action number 57. We call upon federal, provincial, territorial, and municipal governments to provide education to public servants on the history of Aboriginal peoples, including the history and legacy of residential schools, the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, treaties and Aboriginal rights, Indigenous law, and Aboriginal Crown relations. This will require skills-based training in intercultural competency, conflict resolution, human rights, and anti-racism. Call to action number 92. We call upon the corporate sector in Canada to adopt the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as a reconciliation framework and to apply its principles, norms, standards to corporate policy and core operational activities involving Indigenous peoples and their lands and resources. This would include, but not be limited to, the following: commit to meaningful consultation, building respectful relationships, and obtaining the free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous peoples before proceeding with economic development projects. 2, ensure that Aboriginal peoples have equitable access to jobs, training, and education opportunities in the corporate sector, and that Aboriginal communities gain long-term sustainable benefits from the economic development projects. 3, provide education for management and staff on the history of Aboriginal peoples, including the history and legacy of residential schools, the United Declarations of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, treaties and Aboriginal rights, Indigenous law, and Aboriginal Crown relations. Because of these 3 calls to action, JEDI created the Indigenous Reconciliation Awareness Module. It has been a labor of love over the last 5 years, where it has undergone numerous iterations and changes, including converting it to a virtual format within the last year. It is a living document that will continue to be updated and expanded over the years to come, and as our reach grows. We have delivered the content to over 500 people, and the feedback encourages us to continue this path. One testimonial we have received. Thank you for the Indigenous Reconciliation Awareness Module training that you provided to our team. It's difficult to put in words just how profound the experience was for me. Your IRAM training launched me to a whole new level of comprehension and compassion, and a desire to act, take part in the changes and reconciliation even more. You are all skilled communicators and trainers, and I appreciated your depth of knowledge, incredible openness, strength, and vision. If you'd like more information about our reconciliation awareness module, please let us know or visit our website to learn more. Our 2017 plenary included many insightful conversations that produced a variety of recommendations relating to reconciliation in the workforce and through economic development. JEDI produced a report on that event, and if you would like to revisit it, you will find it on the JEDI website, and we will include a link in the chat. Right now, I will review the recommendations of the report, because even though the discussion took place almost 5 years ago, the recommendations are still relevant today. So here are some workforce recommendations. 5 factors that contribute to the success of recruiting and retaining Indigenous workers in New Brunswick. Communication with Indigenous communities. It is essential to build positive relationships in the workplace for Indigenous employees through networking and mentoring. Participants discussed how employers should reach out to the Indigenous communities proactively by attending community events and meeting with their community leaders. When discussing workforce opportunities with communities, employers should ask what the Indigenous communities want or need. Opening these lines of communication should result in lots of dialogue, letting barriers down, and opening up to the communities about workforce needs. 2, cultural sensitivity. Employers should require staff to participate in cultural sensitivity training. This training would focus on educating non-Native people until there is less racism and more education. It was recommended that this training become part of the required orientation and training for all employees within organizations. 3, policy. Participants recommended that human resource policies be amended to better reflect cultural awareness. They spoke of the moral, social obligation, and social responsibility to hire Indigenous workers. Employers should make sure HR staff are taking the issue seriously and network with Indigenous employees and communities to ensure that their policies positively impact Indigenous peoples in the workplace. 4, client-centered approach to recruitment. In order to improve recruitment and retention, it is recommended that employers show respect to every individual. This refers to a client-centered approach to recruitment and retention that acknowledges the unique factors that every individual brings to the workplace. To support this approach, participants recommended employers listen to the needs of their employees and check in with new hires regularly. Individuals may require more flexible work schedules and support or wraparound programs like daycare and jobs for spouses, if possible. Help deal with family pressures. This approach would also identify the strengths of employees and give them the chance to use their strengths in the workplace. 5, skills enhancement. As an essential part of the client-centered approach is providing opportunities for the Indigenous workers to enhance their skills for in-demand careers. This involves identifying community resources, projects at work, and implementing training across the province that taps into these resources and applies the best practices from previous successful projects. These targeted training programs would fill the gap between industry and skilled workers, make people more employable, and foster entrepreneurs within communities. Next, I'll move on to the economic development recommendations. Five recommendations for decolonizing the relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples and building positive relationships and economic development are: 1, community engagement. Participants repeatedly mentioned that they need to build relationships through continuous communication and engagement. Events like the JEDI Plenary Mentioned as opportunities to bring people together. While networking events are beneficial, the public and private sector should also be visible in the communities. This can be accomplished through sponsorships of community events, hosting community open houses, promoting workforce and business success in the communities, and maintaining a social media presence. Participants also stated that participating in Indigenous events to better understand diversity is a necessary part of reconciliation. 2, meaningful engagement. While building visibility in the First Nation communities is important, participants stated that the community engagement must be meaningful. Non-Indigenous organizations should recognize unceded territory and treaties and address the challenges that have arisen from colonial history. Dialogue must be meaningful, empathetic, and authentic. Say what you do and do what you say. This aligns with the Crown's duty to consult with Indigenous communities when considering actions that may impact the exercise of Indigenous and treaty rights of the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoq and Passamaquoddy peoples. Meaningful engagement should also include hiring community members and supporting the work of the Indigenous community organizations. Procurement policy. In order for the provincial and federal governments to build positive relationships with Indigenous peoples, the participant recommended procurement policy changes in the public sector. Participants called upon the federal and provincial government to legislate a procurement strategy that requires government tenders to include an Indigenous partner clause. 4, long-term sustainable economic benefits. Participants agreed that building positive relationship with Indigenous people should result in long-term sustainable economic benefits. Relationship building was discussed as a part of reconciliation process to build mutually beneficial relationships so that the Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples can thrive economically in New Brunswick. The participants recommended revenue sharing be negotiated for resource development projects and joint ventures be formed to build capacity for Indigenous businesses. Participants also recommended that annual research be conducted to assess economic leakage through neighboring communities. Economic leakage refers to the money spent by First Nation community governments or membership on necessary goods and services off reserve. When that money could be spent within the community if the businesses or services existed within the band membership. These economic leakage studies would support economic development, community planning, and business support for Indigenous peoples. Overall, there was a common commitment to continuing the process of reconciliation in both Indigenous and non-Indigenous organizations, and the government departments represented at the JEDI Plenary. Participants commented on their responsibility to continue educating staff and sharing the history as they return to their workplaces. As Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples build their understanding of history and apply the TRC calls to action, the process of reconciliation will progress and Indigenous peoples will become equal participants in a thriving New Brunswick economy.
Thank you, Stan, for sharing that information. So some great topic that we'll be covering today with our partners. With that being said, I would just like to extend a welcome to our president, Alex Deedham. Alex, thank you for joining us today. And I guess we will introduce our first speaker, Chief Patricia Barr. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Alex.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry that I'm late joining. And thank you, Stan, for pinch hitting. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Unfortunately, we had a finance committee meeting this morning at 10 o'clock. It went right over to lunch hour. I haven't eaten yet. So, but it's in advance of a council meeting tomorrow to discuss some major problems in terms of loss of revenue from the province. So we have to make some adjustments in order to try to survive for the remainder of the year. So again, thank you for attending, and thank you very much. And I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No problem at all, Alex. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So I will take this time to introduce our first panel speaker, Chief Patricia Bernard. She is a Wolastoq woman, grandmother, lawyer, and chief of Madawaska Maliseet First Nation in northern New Brunswick. Her commitment to resolving a 250-year-old specific land claim dispute for the benefit of her community has been ongoing for the past 23 years. But this major file is only one of many of her accomplishments throughout her career. Prior to becoming chief in 2013, Patricia was a counselor for the community since 2007. Patricia worked, excuse me, for the federal government and specific claims branch in Ottawa and in governance and registration in Amherst with the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada. From 2000 and 2006, she has a degree in education and law and was called to the New Brunswick Bar in 2000. And excuse me, she was the first Wolastoqey woman to graduate with a law degree. All of her time in university was focused on Aboriginal history and law, and it has definitely paid off. Aside from her focus on land claim, Chief Bernard, while a counselor and legal and governance advisor, she was the legal and governance advisor to her community and focused on much of her time on developing and implementing policies, bylaws, and protocols that work towards transparency, accountability, fairness, and overall good governance. And as chief, she's been instrumental in bringing unity to the Wolastoqey Nation in New Brunswick. In her first year as chief, she held her first meeting in her community towards uniting the Wolastoqey communities and was the leading promoter until a unified organization was structured. Patricia continues to be instrumental in advocating for the advancement of Wolastoqey and Indigenous peoples in New Brunswick generally, and having Aboriginal and treaty rights recognized and implemented within this province, and in advancing the very important work of reconciliation. She serves as a role model for all young New Brunswickers, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous alike. Her home community of Madawaska is the model for any Canadian community. Madawaska First Nation is a major economic driver in the region and contributes revenue not only for her community, but also for the local municipal government of the city of Edmundston and for the provincial government as well. Grey Rock Power Center is an economic success with a strong foundation that has progressed under her leadership. Her exemplary leadership was recently recognized when her community was awarded the 2018 Indigenous Economic Development of the Year Award by CANDO, a national Indigenous organization involved in community economic development. And in 2019, Chief Bernard was appointed the Order of New Brunswick, one of the highest honors for any civilian in the province. And under Chief Bernard's leadership, Madawaska recently voted in a referendum community vote to leave the Indian Act in regards to the management of lands. Her community also left the Indian Act with respect to elections and membership. Self-determination and self-government are continuous goals for Chief Bernard, and she's not stopping anytime soon. So welcome, Chief Bernard, for joining us. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Val. So I didn't prepare a major presentation. I was asked to speak a little bit about land claims and Aboriginal title and treaties. So I'd like to just do a little bit of a discussion about the difference between them. And then I'll just give you a little brief synopsis of the land claim that we just settled, and then the process that took. And then I'd like to open it up for questions, because I prefer questions as people can focus more on their area of interest. So the big thing is, and I was just talking to my husband about this, because most people don't quite understand land claims versus like Aboriginal title. And it's important that those are very distinguished. So what the land claim settlement that Madawaska just went through was a specific land claim. And that's a policy that was put in place by the federal government. So you have comprehensive land claims and specific land claims. So specific land claims are really about the government doing something wrong or not doing something that they should have done. And that's a specific land claim. So in the case of Madawaska, what happened was back 230 years ago, the province of New Brunswick set aside 4,000 acres of land for reserve for Madawaska. And over a span of about 80 years, that land was alienated unlawfully. And that's where the breach happened. So Canada was, sorry, not Canada, but New Brunswick or the Crown was supposed to protect that land that was set aside, and they didn't. Settlers were encroaching and squatting on the land, and the government issued them land grants. And so in that process, Madawaska lost over 3,000 acres of land illegally. So this was a claim that I had brought forward almost over 25 years ago, actually. So that is a specific claim, and that's a specific claim because there was an obligation, a lawful obligation on the part of the Crown to protect that from being taken away. And so, of course, this happened before Canada was a country. It was New Brunswick, but that responsibility got transferred over to Canada when Canada did become a country in 1867. So even though the breach happened before Canada was a country, they were responsible. And just so you know, New Brunswick wanted nothing to do with this, had no part in it, even though they were the ones responsible for setting aside the land and taking it away. So that is a specific land claim. Now, a comprehensive land claim is more of like a modern treaty process. And that was kind of put into place a long time ago when, I think in the 80s, 70s or 80s. And that was really to try and deal with areas that hadn't actually gone through any land cession treaties. And so a lot of that is it's out in British Columbia, and it's here as well. So it's more of a modern treaty making process along with self-government, a self-determination. So a self-government agreement, which would mean that a First Nation can completely opt out of the Indian Act and be self-governing, but then there's a whole set of rules around that. And you know, even though everybody hates the Indian Act, there are some protections in there for First Nations. So land claims, there's two kinds. There's comprehensive and specific, which I just explained. And then you have Aboriginal title. Now, they kind of seem to go together because a comprehensive land claim would be in an area where the land was never ceded. But if the land was never ceded, who owns the land, right? So as we all know, in Canadian law, the Crown owns all the land. Even if you bought your piece of property in town and you have you have your deed, your fee simple, what have you, you don't actually own it. You have a bundle of rights to that land. So if the government needs it, you're out of there. So you know, when you're in law school and you hear this, you're like, the Crown owns all land. That's just like, wow. Well, what about Aboriginal people who didn't give up their land or who weren't conquered or who weren't? And so that's where Aboriginal title comes in. So there's like an underlying ownership to the land. And that is something that the Wolastoqey, that's what we did back in October of 2019. We filed an Aboriginal title claim. So we're basically saying we never gave it up. So the underlying title belongs to us. So that's different from another, like a specific land claim, which really deals with, I mean, they call it specific because that's exactly what it is. It's specific to an obligation, a legal obligation. So, and then comprehensive claims is really more about modern treaties. And that's a scary term because a lot of people are thinking, oh, no, our treaties are fine. Yes, our peace and friendship treaties are fine, and we don't want to get rid of our peace and friendship treaties, but out west, further out west, they didn't even have any treaties. So it's important to sort of distinguish that, because when people hear, oh, you know, the Wolastoqey, they just filed a big land claim. It's actually a title claim. It's not a land claim. So we're looking for the underlying recognition that that title belongs to the people who were originally here and never gave it up, whereas a land claim is very specific. So just to give you, like I just briefly gave you a bit of information about the specific claim that we filed, and what's amazing about that is that it's the history of the claim itself is fascinating. I mean, I just love history, so I think it's fascinating. Maybe not everybody does, but the actual history going back into the 1700s, all the way up into the 1800s about what happened and how that land got taken away is amazing. And particularly what is amazing is that until this land claim, the government of Canada thought that our reserve was what they call a de facto reserve. So there was never any instrument that created it. But I found that instrument, and that instrument came from the province of New Brunswick in 1787 by a surveyor general who came here. And this is 230 years ago. And he drafted this amazing, beautiful survey from the Grand Falls all the way to the St. Lawrence. And when he did that, he came here for a few reasons. But it's amazing because if you took a Google Maps and you sort of put it over top of this guy's survey, you would go, wow, how did he do this 230 years ago? You know, there are no drones or GPS or anything like that. So it's an, you know, looking at some of these documents were amazing works of art. And in that document is how he set aside 4,000 acres for Madawaska. And when you look at it and you read all like the side notes of, you know, according to the Indians, there's a lot of beaver here, and there's all kinds of information that you can find. It's just fascinating and amazing. But surprisingly, this surveyor general of New Brunswick, because Canada wasn't a country, that document is nowhere to be found in the province. It happened to be, a copy happened to be sent to Quebec, the Quebec surveyor general, and it ended up in the National Archives. So if it wasn't for the National Archives, better record keeping, because the province of New Brunswick really stinks at it, we wouldn't have that map. And in fact, unfortunately, all of his field notes were missing, because that would be a fascinating find. And so yeah, so just going through that history was amazing. And what happened when I was an undergrad at UNB, I was majoring in history, and I did an independent study on my reserve, and I came across maps. This was in the early 90s that showed reserve at different sizes. And so I thought, wow, this doesn't make sense. So I dug further, and that's when I realized that this was wrong. This didn't make sense. So when I went to law school and I submitted the claim in 1998, so I did a rudimentary historical report. I was a student, and then a rudimentary legal argument. We sent that off to Canada, and they sat on it for 11 years. And when they gave us an answer, and they came back and said, yeah, we didn't do anything wrong because there was never a reserve there. So I'm on a reserve right now. If there was, when did it happen? And so that was their legal argument. So we ended up in front of the Specific Claims Tribunal, because so say me and Val have an argument about something, and then I say, okay, here, Val, here's all the documents. This is how you're wrong. And I give it to Val, and Val looks at it and says, yeah, I didn't do nothing wrong. So that's clearly not fair, right? So this is why they created the Specific Claims Tribunal. Even though it is government run, it does have a bit of an arm's length component to it. So 5 years at the tribunal. So the very first thing that happened when we brought our claim to the tribunal, the government tried to get me off the file. They said, oh, no, you can't work on this file. You used to work for us, and you would have had access to our justice opinions, which I had been working there 10 years previously. You know, it'd be pretty sad if they didn't update their legal opinions, but whatever. They tried to get me off, put a motion, that failed. And then they tried to not allow me to use updated legal arguments because, oh, well, the minister didn't have a chance to make a decision on that. And I'm like, so I don't get to benefit from the change in law over the past 12 years that you sat on my claim? They lost that argument. Then they didn't want me to do new research because or expand the scope of my claim because the minister didn't have a chance to look at that. But they failed in that aspect too. So I was able to do this 5 years, and we finally won the claim. And the decision is an amazing one. It's great history. It's a great story. Yeah, and then of course the settlement was done within a 3-year period. on and off inside the tribunal because Canada just was really dragging their feet. And of course, there was an election in the middle of our negotiations, and then COVID happened, and very quickly, they finally, this happened quite quickly because in November of 2020, we received a letter of offer to settle the claim. And so one of the things is, even though we lost 3,000 acres, 1,000 of those acres are in Madawaska, Maine, on the international border, and they didn't want to deal with that. So we said, okay, fine, well, I'll go after that another day. So really what we did is we negotiated for a loss of 2,000 acres on the Canadian side. And in exchange, which was pretty much all of downtown Edmundston. So it was the whole city of Edmundston. And in an exchange, they decided to award us 145 million plus they're going to add 1,935 acres to reserve. And that becomes an obligation that they have to fulfill. So that was a specific claim. And that took almost over 25 years from start to finish when you take into account the research part of it. And that's the sort of times we live in when it comes to claims. So title claims, or even any particular fight you have with the government, these things take forever. So our title claim right now is, it only started because we only filed that in October. So we've got decades ahead of us. We've got decades of research, and right now, I can at least speak for the Wolastoqey. Our relationship with the province is not at the greatest. We find ourselves constantly going to court, even just to determine and contractual interpretation things. And so right now we're in a huge battle with this particular government issuing notices to terminate our tax revenue sharing agreements, and that's a big concern, because we will now need to sort of strategize how we're going to just start asserting our own jurisdiction on reserve. So I know I'm a bit all over the place, but I'm sure people there have some questions maybe on some of those things. If not, I could feel free to give you some more history on the claim. But if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, I have a few questions, and thank you again for joining us this afternoon, Chief Patricia. I guess just kind of like, I know you've been talking a bit of, the title claims, I guess. What would that mean, to the Wolastoqey communities and the people if and when, that title claim is successful?
Well, it's going to mean a great deal, because right now, there's a lot of Crown land. Unfortunately, less Crown land in Wolastoqey territory than there is in Mi'kmaq territory. But that particular Crown land we would become the landlords to that, as opposed to the province. And so when they found Aboriginal title existed out in British Columbia with the Joe Coton decision in 2014, basically the bottom line was there was the Crown Forest Act they were arguing, saying, no, it doesn't apply here because we have Aboriginal title, and they won that. Unfortunately, that particular land is not the most valuable land, so it wasn't as contentious as what might be coming down the pipes in the future in British Columbia. But the same would apply here. So if we prove that we are the original title holders, then we in essence become the landlords. So the Crown Lands and Forests Act wouldn't really apply there unless we decide what's going to happen. So this would leave up in the air a lot of concern to large corporate leaseholders of Crown land, and we all know who I'm talking about here, particularly in New Brunswick, and that would be very scary for them. And surprisingly, they're being quiet right now. The Wolastoqey have made it very clear that we have no interest in going after, third-party bona fide purchasers for who purchased their land. Like, so if you have a piece of land in Fredericton, you don't have to worry about that. You know, we're looking more at going after the crown land that's left and what's being leased under the Crown Lands and Forest Act, as well as potential large sales to these corporations. So it's going to be a fight. It's a fight not only against the federal government, but the provincial government, but it'll soon be up against some of these larger corporations.
Thank you. I just have a question around land claims is what do you feel are some misconceptions around land claims?
If you're talking about specific land claims or comprehensive land claims, well, comprehensive land claims is, that's a scary term, because if you're sitting down negotiating with the federal government, they could be writing you down as a statistics. Oh, we're talking about stuff, so we're in a comprehensive land claim agreement. And so, and that they are modern day treaties. And so a lot of misconception, I think in the Atlantic is if we are in comprehensive, which I don't think anybody is, at least the Wolastoqey are not. I can't speak for the other communities. That we would be making modern day treaties and then getting rid of our peace and friendship treaties. And that's absolutely not true. That's not anything that any one of us would want to do, I'm sure. So, and then if you're talking more about specific land claims, a big misconception there is because when we won the land claim, it was pretty much for the whole of downtown Edmundston. Well, the people in the city, they panicked. They were like, oh my gosh, you know, are we on reserve? Are we going to get kicked off? What does this mean? Like, people truly believed that the third parties were going to be interrupted or their land was going to be taken. So they were quite scared. Luckily, the mayor of the town, I had many discussions with him, and he made a public announcement, and we did whatever we could to alleviate people's fears of losing their land that they bought in the province. And that's, you know, that's by no means the intention of our people, right? Recognition is number one, but also revenue sharing, and not about going down and saying, okay, now that house is ours, or we're going to tax you, or anything like that. So that's a big misconception, I think.
Thank you. I guess I just kind of started touching a bit on the peace and friendship. So I just treaties. So I was just wondering, what are the peace and friendship treaties to you and your organizations in the Wolastoqey communities?
Well, the peace and friendship treaties that we signed dating back to 1725, and then the subsequent sort of ratifications of those treaties over time, those peace and friendship treaties were there to do two things: to secure peace and commerce, like that. Those are two major things. So economic development is a part of our peace and friendship treaties. It's there because it's meant, even like with the Marshall decision, those treaties guaranteed an Aboriginal person's right to earn a moderate livelihood, which is economic development and commercial. So these treaties are important to us for that particular reason. It's a recognition of our nationhood standing. It's a recognition of the land that belongs to us, the commerce, the government, everything. So they really are the baseline for the relationship that we have with the Crown. And they're extremely important. And it's not just something you can just throw away. I have a lot of non-native friends, and they're like, oh, those treaties are hundreds of years old. Why don't you just get rid of them? Like, times have changed. I said, the Constitution of Canada is over 150 years old too. Let's get rid of that. And of course, at what point is something so old, right? It doesn't make any sense. These are important documents that formed our history and our evolution through centuries of bad relationships that we've had to always proven that, where we are. So Do you have any other questions? I think Allison has a question.
Yeah, I will, we'll pass it over to Allison to ask her question.
Okay.
I'm happy to wait. I'm just so impressed. Your love of history and the ability as a student to be inspired by this and carry it throughout your profession, it really is inspiring. But I'm curious, with all of the miscommunication around this success for your community, have you ever felt threatened when the government is trying to remove you from this discussion? Or, you know, when the announcement's made and the people in the town are scared, have you felt threatened?
No, I'm the youngest of 7 children. And so I've learned to sort of deal with bigger people than me trying to take over stuff. And I know I'm not afraid at all. I've never felt threatened. The city right now, there's always going to be racism. There's systemic racism that exists, but we've done a lot to educate the city and the council, and that's helped a lot. And so at one point we entered into a First Nation municipal agreement. So we have a friendship accord with the city. Mm-hmm. And we've had meetings. And in one of those meetings, it was an interesting exercise where they had the chief and council on one side, and then they had the mayor and all his council on the other. And we filled out like these questionnaires. And one of the questions that was asked to the chief and council was, how well would you scale yourself of knowledge on 1 to 10 on how the city makes decisions? So, we all went to school and we learned a little bit about, politics and stuff. So none of us were braggers or anything. So with that, a 7, maybe 8, maybe 6, around there. When the same question was asked of the mayor and all of his council, and they said, how well do you know how a First Nation government makes decisions? The highest number was 3. Most people said 0, 1, or 3. I mean, it's really, people don't know how things operate. So it's all about teaching, education. And if you can get together, the more you can educate people, the better. And that particular exercise, working with the city and the city council, and worked quite a lot to raise awareness. Because we're smack dab, our reserve is an urban community, smack dab in the middle of Edmundston. They surround us, and we're also on the international US border. So we have, we're an urban community, and at this point, our economic success has made people ask more questions. And that has actually done a lot to educate people, at least locally. I know the province doesn't scare me or threaten me at all, even though they're trying their hardest to, apparently, according to the province, we can't have super wealthy reserves. Forget that. That would be horrible. I mean, Irving, no problem. You go ahead and be super wealthy, and then you take all your money and you take it out of the country. We don't care. But First Nations, oh my gosh, that can't happen. That would be horrible. So this is, and Madawaska really can't help but feel targeted by that, because our communities in this province are not super wealthy. Madawaska made some success and he's poking at us, and that's just typical. I'm in for the game. I tell him, yeah, let's come out and play. Put on your big boy pants and we'll battle this in court if we have to.
I have a question, Chief Bernard. I've been emailing or chatting with Stanley, and he says, well, just when there's a moment, ask your question, because I don't have the question icon on my screen. First of all, thank you for your clarity on the definitions between specific and comprehensive land claims. I was always confused with those. So now you've made it very clear, so I appreciate that information. And you broached into the forestry sector when you mentioned the BC decision in 2014 around forestry, and then you mentioned it about New Brunswick. I know there seems to be some undercurrents in Ontario, because I also have First Nation communities that I work with in Ontario as well as New Brunswick. And I'm just kind of wondering if you're aware of any particular forestry related claims that have been successful in Ontario.
So treaty education is so complex that if you go back in time in history, and when there was a lot of battle between the French and the English, and this is where the peace and friendship treaties really came out of. They were, the French and the English were really trying to get allies to prevent war. War was expensive, and when you're starting a new colony, you don't want to do that. So the peace and friendship treaties were there to help and protect the crown, as well as to provide a recognition to the First Nations. But as colonization starts to move west, somebody in their insight said, oh, well, wait a minute, we need to make sure we have some treaties with these First Nations going forward, because we're not conquering them. And so what happened is you end up with a lot of what they called the numbered treaties and the land cession treaties. And so Ontario is pretty much full of land cession treaties, where they did in the treaties give up millions of acres of land in exchange for small reserves and benefits, and treaty annuities, what they would call. And those treaty annuities still happen, which is crazy, because these treaties that might have been signed in the 1800s promised $5 for every Native person. And so INAC every year goes out and they give out $5, like 100 years later, they're giving out $5, and it's a big deal. Like, it's just, so out in Ontario, the law is a little bit different from the Maritimes, because we don't have land cession treaties. Our peace and friendship treaties never gave up the land. It only recognized our existence, our commerce, and that we would be good. We wouldn't molest their settlers, and they wouldn't molest us, that type of thing. But then when you go out, they started the numbered treaties. And then when you get into the West, well, they didn't do it. They stopped. So that's why when you go out to BC, you can get land title claims, because they didn't cede their land. They didn't give it up. They didn't surrender it. But the other treaties did. So when it comes to forestry, there are other, mind you, there are other legal arguments to be made for consultation, particularly with the duty to consult. So if Ontario has large areas of forestry that are crown lands, that First Nations can practice their Aboriginal and treaty rights there, because the treaties did give them the right to hunt and fish and stuff like that, then these types of forestry acts can't infringe upon that. They can't just wipe away those rights. They come first, and that's where the duty to consult comes in. So unless there's some new legal argument that's going to be made, because I do know that some First Nations in the numbered treaty areas, and by numbered treaties, I'm saying the ones that did cede their land and give up their land, they're saying it wasn't clear. That wasn't what we meant when we signed those treaties. So that's a whole other legal field. So Deborah, I think I captured your question, or I hope I did. Was it something?
Oh, you did. It was a little piece of graduation about the treaties from east to west, and that was the sense I was kind of having, but I didn't want to jump to that conclusion on my own. I don't have the history and legal background that you do, so I was just kind of curious about that. And congratulations on your awards, by the way. And I did meet you when I was when I met with Joanna last fall, as we were preparing for the economic leakage studies for JEDI.
Okay, nice.
Wonderful. Just one more question there, Chief. Krista had in the chat box. I think you kind of touched on it a little bit, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit more. Is it possible that the issue of tax revenue and the media spin is retaliatory to Indigenous title claim? She feels that there's a campaign to taint public opinion against our Indigenous communities.
So, I mean, I guess this all comes down to, is this coincidence or not? If you look at what happened about a year or so ago, we got a letter from the carbon tax. So our tax agreements say that all motor fuel collected taxes collected on reserve will be reimbursed. So then, of course, the carbon tax gets created. And then they're saying, well, no, the carbon tax isn't part of motor fuel. So we're going to stop giving you that money. And so before I go to that, back in 2014, Premier Blaine Higgs was the finance minister. And I had discussions with him. I was talking to him and he was saying these tax agreements aren't right. We need to get rid of them. And I'm like, why? Why would you do that? It makes no sense. Oh, no other province in the country has it. And I'm like, no, but they share their revenues with their First Nations, their natural resource revenues, and you don't. So anyway, a week before they dropped the writ in the province for the election, because it was the David Alward government, they dropped the writ, and I'm like, why are you doing this? And I even told Higgs, I said, you're going to lose this election, but yet you just put in the notice to terminate the agreements. So of course the Liberal government got in and didn't terminate, and we renegotiated better agreements. So right from way back, 7 years ago, he's been wanting to get rid of these agreements. So I don't know if it's necessarily retaliatory, because he's always wanted to get rid of them, because I don't think he likes history, because he even said, oh, forget about the past, let's move forward. Like that's, Aboriginal 101, what not to say to an Aboriginal person, forget about the past. Who the heck says that? Except the premier of this province. And so anyway, he's always made it known to me that he doesn't like the agreements, because he thinks it's taking money away from New Brunswickers. Well, are we not all New Brunswickers here? We all live in this province, and this money stays here. We take that money and we reinvest. And that, like, it doesn't make any sense. Give it to Irving, sure, and he's going to send that off to the Bahamas. But give it back to First Nations, and they'll hire people here, and they'll reinvest here in the province. So it just so happened that he lost a carbon tax case, because we took him to court because we said you're wrong, and of course we won. He waited the appeal period, and then we announced our land claim on a Monday, and on the Tuesday he gives the notice. So it looks pretty retaliatory, but I don't believe so. I think he's had this in his mind all along. It might have just irked him a bit, but he did congratulate me on it. But that's enough money. Madawaska can't have any more. That's it. You're done. You're too super wealthy, is what he's saying.
And I know we're just on the tax revenue side. Can you provide kind of like some examples on what that, that tax revenue does for the First Nation communities, and how does that tax revenue reinvest to economic development, or is there any other services that tax revenue helps provide services to all the First Nation communities?
So, I mean, I can't really speak for what other First Nations do with their particular revenue that they collect, but Madawaska has reinvested. So if you know where the Grey Rock Power Center is, you see just the infrastructure, like putting in the roads and blasting costs us $13 million. And we have to build buildings. And so we invest quite a bit back into economic development, but we also have raised the standard of living to our members in our community immensely. We provide annual funding for housing repairs. We do a lot of infrastructure. We provide education is a major one. We help our students, any student who wants to go to post-secondary, we provide them with a living allowance and all the subsidies necessary to succeed. And so we push a lot into that. We also give out a lot of money for extracurricular activities for our primary and secondary students, and we're talking in the millions there. We also provide a lot more health benefits than what the Health Canada non-insured health benefits would provide. We go above and beyond. So we do quite a bit of standard of living increase in our community, but also, like I said, infrastructure, education, housing, economic development. We throw a lot of money back into it, into those particular areas to actually raise the standard of living of our community.
Thank you. I will encourage everyone, if anyone else has any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. If there's anything that you would like to have any kind of knowledge on, this is kind of the forum for it. So I will check and see if there's any other hands up or anything.
Just one more question. It's about education this time in general. I'm not sure who's going to answer this question, Stanley. Maybe you are, or maybe Chief Patricia as well. Is there's a lot of support for the youth to go to school, and that's awesome. Is there support for existing businesses to deepen their own technical knowledge or skills, or educate, to upgrade their own business skills?
Well, within our community, we provide a lot of incentives for entrepreneurs who are interested in, you know, building up a business plan or anything like that. But we all, like, not only do we help, because there's a lot of funding out there for entrepreneurs that we help to sort of direct them to, but depending on whether they open up on reserve here, we don't provide education with respect to that. But I mean, if a person wants to go into business and go to school, absolutely. I mean, we provide even pay for trainings, the short-term trainings that doesn't normally pay, and we provide for that as well.
And just to add to that, Deborah, kind of what we do at JEDI is we have our JEDI Business Incubator Program, our JEDI Business Accelerator Program, and then we also do a lot of we do other entrepreneurship capacity development as well, as long as we have our JEDI Aboriginal Development Fund that helps with you know, supplementing the cost of business plans, marketing plans, etc. I noticed that Kim had her hand up, so I'll pass it over to Kim.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry, I don't know how to turn my camera on for some reason. It's not showing up here, but I missed a little bit of the beginning. I apologize for that. I couldn't log on, so I was having technical difficulties today. I wish I would have heard your whole presentation, Chief Bernard. My question is in regards to what is currently going on in the province, and it seems that there's, you know, like, you know, in the year, you know, or the outcome of the Truth and Reconciliation and the calls to action, it's amazing to me how this province doesn't seem to be considering those calls to action. And I know that coming up next month is National or Indigenous History Month, as well as National Indigenous Day. And I'm just wondering, is there any type of campaign, a communications campaign that is being considered, you know, just putting our history out there, you know, educating the province, because there's very little known about our history here. Most of the people in the province are not aware of our history, let alone our treaties, and how they are, you know, international treaties, not just, you know, made between provinces. They're, you know, they're international. And I'm just wondering, is there any type of a campaign that is being considered, you know, communication wise, just to put that information out there? And I don't even know if it's possible to shame this government. But if you can, you know, maybe talk to the opposition, to the Green parties, you know, get as many on board, because of course they're all going to side with you at this point, because you know, they can't really make any promises, but they can, you know, put the heat on a little bit. And, you know, is there any way just to respectfully do a campaign to make this government look really bad?
Yeah, you know, we don't really have to do a major campaign to make them look bad. I think they're doing very good on their own that way. We just have to say a few facts. But is there any campaign? Well, I know the University of Moncton here in Edmundston, they are focusing on Indigenous History Month, and they'll be doing lots of presentations, and they've reached out to us as the local community and so they will be working. I don't know what the other universities are doing. Is the province doing it? Well, I don't know, because we're really not talking to the province, or they're not talking to us, because and the perfect example of this was when they did cancel those tax agreements, and I'm sure most people know this, but it had to be the most insulting, and one chief commented on it as if he was slapped in the back of the head by the principal. Because what happened was the province decides to give notice to terminate these agreements. So we get an email at 9 o'clock in the morning. Oh, you need to be on a conference call with the finance minister in 2 hours. And they don't say what it's for or nothing at 11 o'clock. Meanwhile, I get a call from a media guy, saying, "Oh, we have there's going to be a media conference with the Premier and the Minister of Indigenous Affairs. Do you know what it's about?" Like, no. So the Premier himself and the 1/4 Aboriginal Affairs Minister, because she's got 3 other jobs, because that's how important Aboriginals are to this province, that he's only allocated 1/4 of a person. And so they go in front of the media, do a huge presentation as to why they're issuing these cancellations. A bunch of room, like 2 rooms, I think, down at one of the big hotels down in Fredericton. And the media has an hour to ask questions. Then, so all the chiefs get onto a conference call at 11 on a conference call, not a video call, with the Minister of Finance, where he reads a little statement and says, this is notice that the taxations, you're hereby given notice that they're going to be canceled, and I'm not taking any questions. Hangs up. Not like, no chance to ask any questions, nothing. So this is the epitome of the relationship that First Nations have with this province. The Premier and the Aboriginal Affairs Minister too chicken to meet face to face with the chiefs and to give them the notice. Instead, they meet face to face with the media, hoping to gain support probably from the public. And then we pretty much got hung up on by the finance minister. So if I can't explain a relationship, I mean, that's like, yeah, might as well broke up with us over text. Seriously, because that's what it feels like.
Yeah, very disrespectful reaction. It was
Yeah,
unbelievable.
So honestly, is there a campaign to make them look bad? They just have to keep doing stuff, and that's it. And it's going to happen, because what's really happening now is not only are we not having a relationship, and not only is it deteriorating, but it's becoming uncooperative. We're only now finding ourselves going to court after court after court to resolve any particular issue, and that doesn't bode well for anybody. Nobody wants to pay the court fees, and I'm sure New Brunswickers in general aren't happy with him defending clearly negotiable things and in court.
I agree. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm really passionate about that, but that's just the way I talk too.
Keep up the good work. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
We do have one more question in the chat box, Chief, from Rory. And he says that his question relates to skills development and capacity building. What areas of skills development or capacity building do you see most advantageous for the future of your community?
Well, that's a tough question. It's a good question, because I have a lot of members and people that come to me and say, well, what should I do? What area should I go in? Where should I sort of direct my career or my skills? And it's like, honestly, and this isn't something that everybody can do, but you got to do something you love. You got to have passion for your job. So skills development is find out what you like and focus on how that can make you happy. Because if you're a happy person, you could be making all kinds of money and be unhappy. So it's really about finding something that you really enjoy doing and that's worth working for. And that's the big thing. Like, I mean, if you're going to work for Irving and do all the labor and he makes all the money, well, that's not real rewarding. It's not fun. There's nothing about that. There's something about, doing stuff that you love. And in our community, people ask me that. And I said, well, do you like politics? start studying about politics. Are you a hands-on person? Get into the trades. So in any case, what I'm saying is you can do anything you want if you really put your mind to it. It's just what is it you need, what's in the need, and that I can't really sort of say, but yeah, we do. Anybody who wants training, you can get it. Asking for direction is it's a soul searching kind of question that I don't know if I would be able to answer to anybody, but yeah, they can only answer that themselves, I guess. I don't know if I answered the question correctly, but.
Thank you, Chief. I have one quick question. With the Aboriginal title claim, you said that it's going to take, decades to probably, come to a conclusion. Now, has there been talks of, when, I'm going to say when we do win, because I'm hopeful, what the plans will be for the communities in management of the lands? Like, will it be divided equally through the communities? Will it be governed, say, by Wolastoqey Nation, New Brunswick? What is the bigger picture in how that is going to be managed?
That's an excellent question, and I don't think we would be able to answer that. I mean, the leaders that are here right now may not be the same leaders in 10 or 20 years, and there may be a need for a different kind of approach. So it's really, I think, a bit premature. All I can tell you is that the 6 Wolastoqey communities in New Brunswick are really at, their peak of unity. Well, maybe not their peak, but are way, way better off than we used to be. And, sad to say, but sometimes common enemy can unite people. And it doesn't seem to be that's a hard thing for us. Not that the province is our enemy, because we want to work with the province. We want to get along, but we want recognition, and we don't want to be treated like children or sitting there with our hands out. That's that old sort of adage, like, teach me to fish. Don't give me a fish, teach me to fish. And that's really, that's the bottom line. As communities, we have the potential to be extremely self-sufficient. We have the potential to tell the federal government and the provincial government, just let us earn our own way here. Let us do what's best for us. But we need that recognition. And if the province isn't going to give it to us, well, we happen to be on federal land. We need the federal government to step up and give us that support to assert our own jurisdiction. It's in the Constitution of this country. So whether you believe it or not, the Constitution of Canada says that we have the right to self-determination. We have that right, UNDRIP as well. And that's all we need. And just recognize it and let us do it. But they just want to put spokes in our wheels because we're becoming super wealthy.
Right. Thank you for that, Chief. Now we're drawing close to our end time, so I just want to encourage anyone to, if they have any questions, to please ask them now. We will be breaking here before our next session. And I know that people have been making comments in the chat box, so please feel free to read those. I know there's some great comments from Sean Sunias of the FCC and some comments from other participants, but any other questions, please feel free to do so now.
Hi, it's Sean Sunias. Sorry, I'd just made that comment in the chat there around how we engage our young people into kind of reacquainting and reestablishing our connection and with the land, and really how to monetize it. Because out in Saskatchewan, Alberta, some of the western provinces where TLE started to take place in 1992, we still have First Nations that they're leasing that land out to the folks they bought it from, which is a great relationship. It gave them cash flow to kind of begin other processes and gain some business acumen. But now they're kind of shifting and saying, hey, we're in resource construction software, we're exporting stuff internationally, but we have all this in front of us, so we still haven't really determined what our approach is. And certainly we see the agriculture sector that is looking towards Indigenous, much like the resource sector did 10, 20 years ago, looking for labor, right? They're asking a great question, but it's the lowest one on that rung in terms of reconciliation and developing those relationships. So just want to get your thoughts on some of those challenges, or how you may have addressed that or seen some examples there, Chief.
So you're talking about getting back to the land and things of that nature. Yeah. And that's like New Brunswick is, and I can only speak for the Wolastoqey, right? I can't speak for the Mi'kmaq on the eastern coast of New Brunswick or in PEI or Nova Scotia, but we are a river people. We migrated up and down the river and from the St. Lawrence all the way down to the Bay of Fundy. And that's who we are. Like, we are the river. So, a lot of our communities, and if you look to see where the location of our communities are, we are scattered along the river within our territory, not necessarily by our own design. Some Madawaska is the oldest Maliseet community and one of the only ones that's still in existence. There was Meduktuk and Ukpek, but they were removed. So Meduktuk moved to Woodstock, and Ekpak, was part of Kingsclear. So they the fact that over time and remembering that we in the Atlantic provinces were colonized first, it puts us back so much farther. Than when you go out west to the other communities, a lot of them are a little more remote, and so it makes for a different sort of lifestyle. I mean, our lifestyle was extremely disrupted by colonization because and when I did the land claim, one of the major, one of my first independent study was about how the provincial government rewarded those Indians that decided to become farmers. They were praising them and giving them land and trying to get them to get their communities and their families to stop this migratory hunting and fishing lifestyle that we used to live. So unfortunately, in today's modern times, we just can't really do that. And we're actually not even allowed to hunt on Irving leased land. It's Crown land leased to Irving, but we can't exercise our rights there, which makes it really hard to tell people to go back to the, to go back to the land or traditional ways. Because right now I have a camp on Crown leased land. So you can buy a camp on a leased camp. So I bought the land, I bought the camp because the guy built it, and I paid the tax and the lease. And then I said, no, I'm not paying anymore. So I talked to the Crown, the Crown Lands director. And I told him, I said, look, you're asking me to pay taxes and to pay a lease on Crown land that I actually have a right to be on by treaty and Aboriginal right? Yeah, well, that's, he said, you'll have to do that. I said, well, I'm not. I said, I'm not going to pay my taxes and I'm not paying the lease. I find it extremely insulting. So he said, well, we're going to send you like past due notices. And I said, that's fine. I have a folder. I'll put them in the folder. And I said, I'd like to see what you're going to do. Like, please try and evict me. Please. I'm welcoming that. I want you to do that, but I'm not paying the taxes and I'm not paying the lease. And it's been 3 years and I get a notice every month. I put it in the file, but I'm not paying it. And I want them to take me to court, but they won't. They're not going to set a precedent, right? So, but they'll leave me be.
Thank you, Chief. That's and kudos to you. I'd do the same thing myself. Well, that being said, our time has concluded for the session. I really want to thank you, Chief Bernard, for your presentation. Everyone that asked questions, thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Patricia.
You're welcome.
Well, even Patricia.
Presentation from Chief Bernard, she shared, the differences between Aboriginal title claim and regular land claims and the two different types of land claims. and also the process that Madawaska First Nation has undergone with their land claims and their ruling of the land claim that they just won. Some great education on the peace and friendship treaties. So our next session is reconciliation and implementing Indigenous inclusion into the workplace. And we have 4 guests with us today. We have Edie Queen, I'm sorry, Edie for pronouncing her last name wrong. Edie Queen, she's the co-chair of the New Brunswick Community Harvest Gardens, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to growing food, growing minds, and growing community through its 2 community gardens and Hayes Farm, which is a community teaching firm located in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Constantly searching for elegant, holistic solutions to societal issues, Edie believes experiential land-based learning is critical to addressing both climate change and our collective poverty of purpose. We also have Peter Seymour joining us. He's a program consultant for Working NB, which is a department of the post-secondary education, training, and labor for the province of New Brunswick. He's been in that role for the last 7 years. He's been responsible for managing partnerships with Indigenous organizations at the provincial level, and also assisting regions with this and forming Indigenous partnerships. Prior to this, he was an educator at MBCC and more recently with Working NB. We have also Keith Mcintosh with us. He has led his award-winning software testing company, PQA Testing, from his home province of New Brunswick for more than 20 years. He has grown the company into a multi-million-dollar organization with 9 offices across Canada and a team of more than 150 professionals who provide quality testing services to customers both at home and abroad. In 2015, following the Truth and Reconciliation Report and his participation in the Governor General's Canadian Leadership Conference, Keith founded Plato Testing, which is the world's first Indigenous-led software testing company. And his goal was to address 2 important issues: our country's shortage of technology professionals and high rate of unemployment among Indigenous. And what sets Plato apart is its commitment to not only to training, but employment members of First Nation, Métis, and Inuit communities as software testers. Today, Keith and Plato Testing are proud to have trained more than 150 Indigenous software testers, injected more than $7 million directly into the Indigenous economy, and he's created meaningful impact in more than 50 communities across Canada. And we also have Kelsey Bernard with us, who is the employment recruiter for MB Power. And MB Power, of course, is the power utility that provides reliable, safe, and sustainable energy to New Brunswickers. And Kelsey, she has obtained a business degree as well as human resources management diploma. And she has been with NB Power as an intern of JEDI since 2017. And Kelsey has been focusing on following functions at NB Power: student recruitment, Indigenous recruitment, and new employee onboarding. So if I can get you to just kind of raise your hand and just kind of let people know who you are. And I will pass it over to Edie, and she can kind of fill us in on what she has been doing with Hayes Farms and MB Community Harvest Gardens. And
sure. Thank you very much. I just want to thank everyone at JEDI for giving me the opportunity to be here on this panel. It's quite an honor. What we've been doing, MB Community Harvest Gardens has been running community gardens since 2011. And our focus has always been on creating an environment where people can learn to grow their own food that is accessible, inclusive, and sustainable. And it was around 2015 that we realized that a lot of folks really enjoyed the benefits of gardening, but they really wanted to find a way to make a living growing food. And so we started a feasibility study in 2016, and we found out that Today's farmer, she's female primarily, coming from an urban environment, and is looking to grow in an ecological manner, regenerative manner, that sort of thing. And so we thought, okay, well, let's try see if we can create an actual community teaching farm. Fredericton seemed like a really good location because we have a number of universities that we could access these individuals from, who are primarily, with some post-secondary education. And yeah, we started seeking funding, and we did a feasibility study, and we found a particular model that we were really intrigued with, and it is the Tawassen Farm School. And it's in BC, and it's actually located on Tawassen First Nations. And what really appealed to us is that it was not only teaching regenerative practices, but they were including Indigenous foodways and knowledge. And that really resonated with us, and it also resonated with the individuals that were really interested in what we were trying to create. So that's kind of where it all began. And I'm not sure if you want me to, right now, I mean, we're in our 4th year of offering a Learn to Farm program, both an 18-week version as well as a 31-week version. And we're finding that over the years, our cohort has historically been 50% have self-identified as Indigenous. And this year, we're really pleased to say that it's actually grown to 70% of this year's cohort. So it's been an amazing journey, and I look forward to sharing more through the questions for the panel. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Edie. Peter. We can't hear you, dear.
It always happens. Mute, unmute, picture, no picture. Anyway, so I'm Peter Seymour, and I've had the pleasure, really, I think it was in my bio, that I've been responsible for the Indigenous file at working in Brunswick provincially for the last 7 years. And I came to that. I really thought I knew a lot, but I knew really nothing. And the growth that I've experienced over the last 8 years has been incredible. And also, I think the growth that I've seen in our branch and our department has been even more pleasing. I often talk about. I'm old enough to remember when we used to tell dirty jokes, and we were sometimes insensitive to females when we were telling those jokes, and we always had a hard time coming to grips with it, especially when we knew it hurt our loved ones. And finally someone put their foot down and said, that's not right, don't do that. I feel I'm at that point with reconciliation. And again, as I said, I've been more than pleased with the attitudes of the people at working in Brunswick and some of the growth. And I will talk about some of that in the questions. But I think we're on the move, and I recognize the potential for Indigenous employment. In New Brunswick, we have a decreasing population, with the exception of the Indigenous people, and I think this is just a great opportunity. So I'm blessed. I work for working MB, but I might be more blessed to work with the Indigenous well. And that's my phone.
Thank you, Peter. Next up, we have Keith. Do you care to share about yourself and your organization, Keith, and what you've done? You've been working on? think you're on mute, Keith. There you go.
Yeah. Couldn't find the mouse. I think you should get whoever wrote that bio to keep talking about me. It was pretty good. I'm Keith Mcintosh. I run a couple of companies, PQA testing and Plato testing, and had the pleasure of speaking with Peter, give my story to him yesterday. So I hope I will touch base with him to see what he thought of that. Maybe I'll mention it. Let me know. But Plato is a company that was built, came about 6 years ago now, from an idea that came, as the bio said, from a conversation we had while in the Kane Governor General's Kane Leadership Conference. And the idea is that the one opportunity that can be taken anywhere, that is completely mobile, and is technology and technology opportunities. And if we could find a way to bring those technology opportunities to the one demographic in Canada that is growing rapidly, which is the young First Nation, Mbteen, and Inuit people, and the demographic that needs the opportunities that's remote, that's not in the big cities. We could take this opportunity anywhere. So we started that. We came back with that. I came up with that idea in June of 2015, right when the Truth and Reconciliation work came out, and I came back to Ferriton, and I talked to JEDI probably within a week or two after having that, and we started the first course was offered in September of 2015. So it took us 2 months, and I'll give you the shout out that we worked with everybody all across the country. There has never been an easier and better organization to work with to get this done than JEDI. So I'll give you that shout out right now. With the goal of creating, we think there's thousands of jobs. There's more jobs in IT than there are people to fill them, and the opportunity is there. How do we get people to take those jobs? We have to find ways to get the training to them, to open up the opportunities, to make them aware of remember to get public speaking, the name escapes me now, but the president of CCAB said in a conference that they have to see it to be it. So young people have to see role models in order to want to go and be that. And if kids are going into social work or teachers or healthcare or lawyers, that's because that's what they see in their communities. If we can so why can't we let them see technology? And JEDI, working with JEDI and working with the communities in the province to bring work close to the community so that the kids can see that there are technology opportunities. It's worked well. As we've taught over 200 people now, in touch in 50 or more communities across the country. It's working. It's going. We're starting. We're sort of at the next phase of where we are now getting large companies, large organizations across the country interested in being part of it. But I'm pretty happy with what we're seeing. I hope to answer through some of the questions that you have listed here. I'll get talk more about it. But the idea of bringing work to people rather than forcing people to go to the work is this pandemic has shown it that's certainly very, very possible to do. So happy to be part of this conversation and bring reconciliation on a person-to-person level, I think is what we're trying to do.
Wonderful. We appreciate our relationship with you, Keith, and continue the good work. We'll come back to the questions here. I just want to get Kelsey to introduce herself, and I'll talk a little bit about what she does at MB Power.
All righty. Yeah, I echo, very happy to be here in front of everybody today. Happy to, have the partnership that we do have with JEDI, and I'm proud to be representing MB Power today. Val, please cut me off if I'm talking too much, please. I usually don't have that problem, but I have a long list of stuff here that I think is, worth sharing with this group. So please don't hesitate to cut me off and steer me in the right direction. So I think I just wanted to start with, I am a recruiter here at MB Power, employment recruiter that, just like Val mentioned, been with MB Power for a couple of years now. And I just want to start it off by saying that, I'm a very small fraction to, the wonderful work that MB Power is doing with respect to Indigenous inclusion. Reconciliation. So please forgive me if I'm not painting the full picture. I'll try my best to cover everything, but I will likely touch on more of the work that I'm doing and that I have an impact on, and it's an important piece too. So I think that's why I'm here today. So I just wanted to give you a little very high level picture of, what are we doing today? So I'll just start, at the very, very beginning. It starts with, where did we come from, right? Where did we start? So at MB Power, we have an Indigenous affairs team, so an internal Indigenous affairs team. And I think that is, that was the beginning of, steps towards Indigenous reconciliation and inclusion within MB Power. And I think that noting that is important to share, because you got to start somewhere. And this group, I think I saw a few familiar names. Some of them are here rooting me on today, and I just want to start with saying I encourage them to speak up if if they ever want to elaborate on anything that I'm about to share, or if they want to correct me along the way. Put your hands up, yell at me, whatever, do whatever. But this team was created here at MB Power to basically, the main purpose was to build and maintain relationships with New Brunswick First Nations communities. So right there, that's a win. We created this team to start fostering those, those relationships and starting those conversations. A couple of years later, they also, established what they call a strategic approach for Indigenous affairs. And I'll just go through it very, very quickly here, because I think that this will kind of guide some of the, this will set the tone for some of the initiatives that I wanted to share with you, okay? So in order for, this Indigenous affairs team at MB Power to kind of, push the dial and to develop and maintain these relationships, they put together this strategic approach that has 3 objectives in it. And I'm going to list them here, and I'll give you a couple of brief examples of each one. These 3 objectives are connected together, they're linked together, they depend on one another, can't have one without the other. I'm just going to list them here quickly for us, and then I'll talk about them, each of them briefly. Let me know if I'm going too fast too, by the way. And I'm also looking through my notes here, so please forgive me. So the first objective is engagement and community relations. So what does that mean? MB Power recognizes the need for Indigenous engagement and community relations. So one of our main objectives is, striving for meaningful consultation, meaningful engagement with First Nations communities. And so that's like the first bucket, or one of the buckets, out of the 3. The second bucket is education, cultural awareness, and sensitivity. Okay, so what that means is MB Power, this company, our organization, recognizes that we need to understand and appreciate our Indigenous peoples, our neighbors, and the culture that they have, and it's a two-way street. Not only do we need to appreciate and learn and understand from our Indigenous peoples, but we also need to dedicate time to orientate our business to Indigenous peoples as well in our communities. Kind of some of the operations that we have, and what do we do? What do we do here at MB Power? So it's a two-way street, this is done via, we have cultural awareness presentations. We have just recently created an amazing computer-based training that was developed in-house. I believe we even have a partnership right now with UNB and a few elders to create a more robust Indigenous cultural awareness, which I'm so excited to see. I'm very super excited about that. This is, right now, before it was, our trainings or Indigenous cultural awarenesses were delivered to, departments that interact with First Nations communities and our leadership and those that are interested. But now having this online CBT, it allows us to, you know, roll it out to all employees across MB Power. So very, very, like, it does a win for us. I thought I'd share that with you. And then the third bucket, so there's the engagement, community and relations, education, cultural awareness and sensitivity. And then the third bucket is employment. So this bucket is near and dear to my heart and my role. So what this is, I guess the overarching umbrella is MB Power putting a focus on increasing First Nation demographics within MB Power. Okay, so that's direct employment, indirect employment, through procurement procedures or processes, through vendors. So I think I'll get more of an opportunity to expand more on that as we get through these questions, but we're doing some really cool things with respect to employment in that area. So I just wanted to just kind of set the tone there that that's where our initiatives are stemming from. And I'll leave it at that.
That's great, Kelly. Some great work being done by MB Power for sure. And thank you for your role in that. So I'm going to ask some questions here. And what I'll do is I'll ask one question, then I'll give everyone an opportunity to answer the question. So, and we'll start off with Edie and continue on with Keith and then, or Peter, Keith, and then you, Kelsey. So my question is, what steps has your organization taken to implement Indigenous inclusion and reconciliation into your workplace?
Well, I don't know if we're unique, but we actually, our intention was to create a program that was specifically incorporating Indigenous knowledge and foodways. And we wanted to use the peace and friendship treaties as our guide in terms of developing relationships. We knew that our focus was going to be that anything that we did at the farm would be human scale, regenerative and relationship based. And by relationship based, it was to be our relationship with Mother Earth, relationship with each other, and ultimately our relationship with ourselves. Because what we found, even through the community gardens, was that when people do connect with the land in an intimate way, that they find what their gifts are. They evolve and they discover, they remember sort of who they are. So this was something that we really wanted to focus on. So the steps that we used was when we initiated Hayes Farm and we had a good idea of what we wanted to offer, we just created a mission statement. We have sort of, and you can find it on our website, sort of the mission goals and guiding principles, where we do state that everything that we teach and do is human scale, regenerative, and relationship based, and that it is in the spirit of honoring Indigenous culture and foodways, integrating principles of land-based learning, decolonization, and reconnection. So this has always been our focus, and that is sort of the initial step that we took. Many, many steps now. This is starting back in 2016. Over the years, what we've done is we've continued to, because it's a unique concept, unfortunately, but it's also very exciting, that funding, trying to find the appropriate funding and partnerships to have us evolve has been, it's an ongoing process for us. But we knew that by setting our intent that we would attract the right people. And we have, over the years, we've attracted the right Indigenous knowledge keepers who can help us make sure that we are, that they guide us. We've developed key partnerships with Indigenous communities, with JEDI. You guys, it's your second year of honoring us with bursaries for our students. Future Ready Wabanagi, so PEDAL program. Working with universities, working with the elementary school at St. Mary's First Nations. All of these different relationships have been developed over time. And we've also this year specifically, have participated in the IRAM training that JEDI has offered, which is brilliant because it's really important for us to make sure that our key staff members are aware of the history and can ensure that although we are attracting people who are right up front, understand what we're trying to achieve here, we need to make sure that they've been exposed to the history, that they understand it, that they have a chance to debrief through it, to not only accept what has happened, but to make it right, to want to follow that path. And in our actual programming, our Learn to Farm programming, where our interns are not, they're from many different backgrounds, that we actually have similar training as part of the curriculum, so that when the interns gather, that they have that exposure to the Aboriginal history here, specifically in the Maritimes, and are aware, and it just develops, it continues to develop that cultural sensitivity.
Thank you for that, Edie. And it's just wonderful work that you guys are doing, with Indigenous communities as well as the non-Indigenous communities. I know I, for one, would love to take advantage of that someday. But I'll move on to Peter next. Peter, what steps has your organization to implement Indigenous inclusion and reconciliation into your workplace?
Yeah, thanks, Val. I was just trying to figure out how to unmute myself. I want to pat Edie on the back, because one of the things that she said, which was having people understand the history and making it right, is probably the key step that Working New Brunswick has done by both the central office and the regions. We've been focusing on everyone receiving the Indigenous Reconciliation Awareness Module training, because I think that's key. You don't appreciate it sometimes when you've had it a couple times, and I'm sometimes involved in the training, but when people that you work with are so moved, and so it's that in itself. It was our first step, and I thought it was important. Now, Ashley Brooks is probably going to give me a hard time here, but one of our places that we really struggled, because some of our regions are in French communities or French regions, and they would love to have the IRAM training, but unfortunately, it's been difficult to get French elders and presenters. So I know JEDI's working on that. I know Ashley's working on it really hard. So that's one of the things, like if we could have, we'd like. I think a tangible step that Working New Brunswick in moving towards reconciliation was, in fact, that we've entered into long-term partnerships with JEDI and with the 4 tribal councils, Maui, Wolastoqey Tribal Council, North Shore Micmac District Council, and New Brunswick Aboriginal Peoples Council. And there's 2 things I want to say about that. First of all, I look at them as true partnerships. And so before, it used to be very transactional. We would do a 1-year partnership, and I'll pick on JEDI. JEDI would write 20, 30 proposals. I would crunch through them. We would give money to do them. They would have objectives, and then they'd have to do it all again. By now we've entered into a 10-year agreement with JEDI, and we allow them to utilize that money in the way that's best. So every year they can come back with a different plan. The other part of this, and it's I'll be self-deprecating here. These are multi-million-dollar agreements, and I'd love to tell you that I approve them all. Unfortunately, that's not my tax bracket, but that tells me that the people who are above me in the organization have kind of got it. They've kind of figured it out. And so with that, I look at it and say, well done. Are we finished? Are we to reconciliation yet? No. But we still continue to work hard on it. Thanks, Val.
Wonderful. Thank you, Peter. And we truly appreciate our relationship with you and the assistance that you do provide. Keith, would you care to share a little bit more on what your organization has done to implement inclusion and reconciliation?
You know, we have two organizations, and one organization is Plato, and we try to be inclusive, and we give work to some non-Indigenous people every once in a while when we have extra work that we can bring them into, include them in it. Plato is 100%. Well, Plato was formed because there are procurement rules around. You can have an Indigenous organization as long as it's majority controlled by Indigenous, by a First Nation or whatnot. And then they have to have, I think it's 30% or 25% of the employees have to be Indigenous, and that qualifies you to win business with federal governments, qualifies you for a lot of different pieces of the opportunities. And part of the problem with that is it doesn't mean jobs for individual First Nations peoples. It brings wealth, but it doesn't always bring opportunities. So Plato is purposely 95% of our staff are Indigenous, through and working towards 100% or as close to get to 100%. It's purposely, Denis Carignan as the president of Plato is a Cree from Pasco, member of the Cree Pasco First Nation. The goal of Plato is to be staffed, led, and owned by Indigenous people. Everybody that in Plato, every employee in Plato has a share in the profit. So if there's profit that comes out of profit, each person is working for it, whereas working for themselves, because the goal of Plato was to teach IT, but also to teach, try and provide opportunities for entrepreneurship, and try and provide the sense of working for yourself and working for your own benefit, rather than, as I think it was Chief Patricia mentioned, working for somebody else. It's not the same. It's better if you're working for yourself. So Plato is all about inclusion. It's all about being equal opportunity and trying to put people on an equal footing. And I brought that back when I started. I brought it back to PQA and said, we're going to do this. We're going to create a testing company that does exactly what we do, and it employs Indigenous, trains and brings Indigenous people into the system and gives them the work. And not anybody everybody in PQA said, okay, how can I do to help? What can I do to help? So one organization is 100% Indigenous. The other organization is 100% supportive of what we're trying to do. It's been a wonderful 6-year experience. And, the cultural awareness and the cultural, the lessons that we've learned, and lessons that the people working that we're at PQA have learned about working with other people, is that you don't see it. Everybody works together on one team, and there is no difference between wherever you're from or whoever you are. That said, it is important to keep learning and keep listening and keep teaching the history and be aware of what came before. But I always worry more about what's going to happen going forward, right? How do we increase opportunities and whatnot, and keep. It's really just a matter of everybody at PQA and Plato being friends. I didn't read the book on what reconciliation and inclusion is, but I figure it's treating everybody as equal people is good enough for us.
That's great, Keith. Thank you so much. Kelsey, I know you touched on a little bit on what your organization's been doing to implement inclusion and reconciliation. Did you want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yes, I would love to. I have quite a few items here. I'll try to keep it short. Sticking to the employment theme. So I just a couple bullet points here that I wanted to share that I think are valuable and that are milestones that I think that we're quite proud of here at MB Power. So back in 2017, I think this is worth mentioning, MB Power hired an Indigenous person to work in the recruitment team, and that's the role that I fill right now. So I think that alone is a stride towards having eyes on opportunities for Indigenous people. So I work directly with staffing. So I run through staffing processes from start to finish, from consult to prep and to post, to assessments, actual interviews, and selection and onboarding. So run the full process. So I have my eyes on everything. So I think that alone, that's really big stride towards inclusion and reconciliation for Indigenous people in the workforce at NB Power. You know, I'm able to advocate for Indigenous people in staff and processes, and it just gives it that bit more attention than it may not have. Another item that I wanted to share is just recently we set targets, recruitment targets, so hiring targets for Indigenous people, hiring Indigenous people. So right now our numbers are not where we want them to be. So our goal is to reflect our numbers to reflect the New Brunswick Indigenous population, which is the 4%. And we're hoping to get there over 8 years. And that's not a minimum. I know I hate putting numbers to things, but having the targets allows us to drive those conversations and to have something to look forward. So it's not the maximum. We're not going to meet the targets and say, okay, we're done. We set these targets so that we have something to drive those conversations, to put that in front of a hiring manager and to, you know, say like, yeah, we have this target. So what can we do? So with that, I just want to mention, I think I'll get to this later down in the conversation, but we set these targets now. Now, what are we going to do? So we're currently working on an Indigenous recruitment strategy. So we have these targets now. How are we going to meet these targets? And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But a couple things that I think are also worth mentioning is, leveraging external partnerships and networks have been, amazing for us. The JEDIs, the community employment training offices, tribal councils. These have been very, very vital for us, not only to connect us with Indigenous candidates, but also being able to share opportunities with the community. So just wanted to, echo or, acknowledge that having those partnerships has definitely gotten us where we are today, and we hope that it will go forward. Just two more items, I guess, that I think are worth sharing on my end is leveraging and promoting Indigenous student programs. So trying to learn, what's out there with respect to these programs. So, we have the JEDI Indigenous Internship Program that I came in through to NB Power. Wonderful program, comes with a subsidy, and it's just been, it's the easy sell here at NB Power, and I'm sure with other organizations it would be. I mean, you have JEDI Cybersecurity Program that we dabble into as well. Familiar with St. Mary's First Nation Summer Student Program. So trying to, leverage and leverage those student programs and to promote them within the organization and use those as avenues for Indigenous people to eventually work for us full time. Another one worth mentioning is, I don't know if everybody's familiar with Mbteen Apprentice program. This program is it's a teen apprenticeship exposure to high school students that are interested in getting some exposure in the trades, and we take advantage of this program, and it's there's actually opportunities within that program to hire an Indigenous student through that program. So thought I'd throw that in there, something that we, we're working on today. And just a final note here. I think it's worth mentioning that we use a tool that we use for hiring is it's a psychometric assessment. It's called Success Finder, formerly known as Pathfinder. Some people use different types of assessments, similar to Myers-Briggs, the 4-color thing assessment, something along those lines. And I just think it's worth mentioning here that this tool is used in our staffing processes. So it's weighted, and it's an assessment that gives us some insight into the candidate's predicted strengths and weaknesses and their behavioral styles. So it doesn't measure, their ability, but it measures their predictability, so their style, their preferred way of doing things based on an assessment that they took. Okay. The reason why I wanted to bring it up here is because we use this tool for staffing, yes, but it's also used for coaching. It's also used for, mentoring people, whether they're in the right career fit or not. Trying to have those conversations of, oh, maybe you should try this, or maybe you should try that. So we use this today for staffing and helping people, trying to see if they're in the right career fit or not. But I'd like to eventually start using it for, any other, Indigenous inclusion type initiatives where, maybe we are guiding people on what career path to go into, or what succession planning that we can do for Indigenous people or employees while they're with us at MB Power.
I have a quick question, Kelsey, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
You said it was okay to interrupt. Thank you very much.
Of course, yes.
As soon as you said MBTI, it caught my attention because I've been asking around for that for the last several years. If there was one, because I'm used to the standard MBTI testing process, et cetera, and how you use it. Because I use it for training sometimes, teaching and career guiding, if you will. But on the flip side, I was very aware by the questions on there that they weren't culturally geared for Indigenous candidates. And I was actually getting to the point of seeing if I should apply to see if I can get somebody to do one or translate one for me. But if there is one in existence, if you give us a link to where we can get, I guess, the manual or the questions so that we could do that Indigenous, I would appreciate that.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if I'm hoping that I'm quoting their I'm talking about the same thing that you're talking about. The success, it's called Success Finder. It's a psychometric assessment, and I will send out some information to maybe I can send it to the whole group or put it in the chat. Maybe a link to the website. I'm not really quite familiar with the sensitivities that it comes with, Deborah. With regards to cultural sensitivities, I'm not really sure about that, but that raises a really good question and concern that I think I'm going to bring back to my team actually to learn more about that. But yes, I will share it with you.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Thank you.
I have one more question. It's going to be a combined question because I want to give people a chance other than myself to ask some questions. So this one here is, what are some of the lessons that you've learned while implementing initiatives into your workplace, and what have been some of the obstacles? So I'm going to go back to Edie. If you could share with us some of the lessons that you've learned while implementing initiatives into your workplace, and what were some of the obstacles?
Sure. Well, our focus has always been on co-creating our programming. The idea is that we're constantly evolving in terms of what our offerings are. For instance, this year, we've moved from not only having the 18-week programming, but we've expanded to a 31-week as well. And this was specifically for being able to bring interns. Specifically, we have some Indigenous interns who are coming from 3 different First Nations in New Brunswick to do a full season with us so that they can take what they learn back to their communities, and we can help support them in initiating, either if they want to replicate something like what Hayes Farm is offering, or if they have their own food sovereignty projects. So again, co-creating and collaboration is key, and we want to make sure that we include that. So I think the biggest challenge, or the biggest lesson that we've learned, is for those of us who are non-Indigenous to decolonize our thinking. The idea is trying to straddle programming that is very much based in a colonial mindset, kind of this very linear concept of having an end goal in mind and that sort of thing, with allowing ourselves to open up a bit. I think what we've discovered is that time is actually elastic, and relationships are so rich and complex that we need to give ourselves permission to just be and be with each other and not rush things. I think that is very much a colonial mindset of, staying with deadlines and moving forward, that kind of thing. So that concept of time and where to devote your energies and when to stay quiet. So that has been a big lesson for us. it means that we need to always be checking in. Again, like I said, this year we have 70% of our interns are self-identify as Indigenous. So that constant check-in with them to make sure that they can provide feedback, that they will feel that they're in a safe space to be able to speak up and challenge us. We know that we will make mistakes, and we want to just make sure that we keep it open so that those kind of mistakes are brought to our attention. And again, we want to make it right. And so trying to convince our non-Indigenous staff to not be afraid to make mistakes, but also to honor the corrections. In terms of the obstacles, I think, again, what we're considering, it's very opposite. I mean, with what we've gone through in 2020, everyone's gone through, you know, with COVID, we've got climate change, we've got a lot of our structure, you know, our societal structures are collapsing, or at least it's revealing where there are gaps. And so it's been a really transitional period of time for everyone. And that in itself has been an obstacle because it is, again, that colonial mindset of wanting to plan something and things ever changing. So that has been an obstacle. Funding has also been an obstacle for us because we're both trying to create programming that doesn't yet exist or hasn't existed. Plus we're trying to keep it holistic so that we can make it available to everyone and accessible. And I believe this year, 2021, is going to be amazing because even the Department of Agriculture has come out with this new local food and beverage strategy, which very much is focused on Indigenous communities and food sovereignty and appreciating that form of agriculture or food ways, if we want to call it. So again, I think now that more people are realizing what we are trying to do, the obstacles are lessening, but we have to remain open-minded and willing to listen.
Great, thank you, Edie. Peter, what have some of the lessons and obstacles you faced while implementing initiatives into your workplace?
Val, I recognize the time, and so I'll be short. I guess I've learned a lot about myself on the journey of reconciliation. I really appreciate what Keith said, because to me, it is a very personal journey, and it's one person to one person. Now, I've really challenged myself to guide people so they might start their own journey. I'm reminded of a phrase, I guess, that, or a saying that people have said to me, is that if no one's following you, it's not a parade, it's just a walk. And so I want to create a parade. What are the obstacles? We are government. You know, government machinery moves slow with consultations and stuff like that. And so we look at policy changes, and it takes time for the consultation. I want to recognize Edie, though, but as she says, they're written in a way that only the white man can read, and even some of the white people deal hard with it. And so we've got an opportunity. If I get enough people in the parade, that making those changes will be easier. I guess I also want to kind of, this is a bit off topic, but I tip my hat to Keith yesterday, and I also want to tip my hat to Kelsey, because I think from the perspective of working New Brunswick, we're long past the days where we could train for the sake of training. It has to be training for employment. We need people. We need trained people working at jobs. And we have some antiquated policies in place that you can get them trained, but there is either, whether it's unions or whether it's government making rules. And I'm drawn to a situation that's happened recently, and you know, Indigenous communities are struggling with care for their elders, and looking at long-term long-term care homes, and that will have an effect on other populations of the community, that they'll have houses that these elders will be giving up. But you know, we've got laws in place, and no matter if we train, if we build, there's still a barrier between that and actually having an elders residence with Indigenous workers. So I guess the part of the struggle is as many people as possible to understand this would be maybe the greatest obstacle, but also the best opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Keith, did you have anything to share? Lessons or obstacles that you want to share?
Sure. I started Plato. I said, well, look, there's IT, there's 190,000 unfilled jobs. I'll just go hire people and fill them. And I heard Kelsey say, well, we're going to hire 4% of our workforce will be Indigenous, and that's great. But the first obstacle I found out was that those people aren't out there to hire. You know, they haven't gone and they don't have the right training. They aren't available. So first obstacle, we said, well, we're going to build our own training course. And then when we started looking at the training, okay, let's build a training course, you realize, well, maybe there aren't enough high school graduates. So we had to, how do we lower the bar? How do we make the entry point into the training close enough? So we kept sort of peeling layers of onion back and trying to remove as many barriers as possible for the training. The course is free. It's short enough that you can see the end. It's portable. We can do it anywhere. And looking in this last year, we've done it completely remotely. So those are some of the idea of, here, I got money and a job, I'll just hire people. We had to stop and say, well, why isn't it working? So we did the training course, and I use the analogy of, you can, the story is, if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. If you give a person a fish, they'll eat for, how do I do this without being, they'll eat for a day. If you teach them how to fish, they'll eat forever. But that's not quite true, because if you teach somebody how to fish, but they're standing in the middle of the prairie, if there's no fish around, if there's no pond to fish in, or and I'm going to tie this to MB Power and a lot of the companies that we end up dealing with, is if you teach a person to fish, but the fish are in a place that's so big they need a giant boat to get to it, that's not going to do any good. So it's not just about the training, it's about creating the opportunities to get to work after the training. The two things have to tie together. And when people are coming out of these courses that we offer, that JEDI offers a lot of, and then they go to compete, we take for granted some of the advantages that non-Indigenous people have. They have a network of people. They have an infrastructure that supports them to go get a job. They know people that are already there. I was walking down the street with Denis, and he said, if I was a kid, I couldn't apply there because nobody looks like me that works there. And there's another big sign with a big bank on the side of it. Yeah, I couldn't. How would I get a job there? There's nobody. I don't know anybody that's ever been there. So it's not just about the training. We had to go back for obstacles. We had to go back and say, okay, how do we remove some of these barriers to get people in? Businesses, companies that we work with, like Suncor, they go out and have contracts for work, but the requirements are university degree. The requirements are 5 years experience in this field. How does a young person get in the door? So I think that businesses, and I'd love to, Kelsey, if ME Power is having trouble finding employees to bring in hire, I'd love to be able to subcontract you. I have 40 or 50 IT professionals I can contract to you. But businesses, corporate Canada, all across Canada want to be part of, want to make a difference. They want to contribute, but they're not set up to accommodate the people coming in at the point in time or level where they're at. Deloitte can hire 1,000 people and put them in their Deloitte University and churn out 1,000 professional consultants, and they do it really easily. But 1,000 people look exactly the same. They're all top students from the top universities, and they're type A personalities. And they've got good marks, and they come from backgrounds that could afford to send them to those universities. We've taught 250 people across Canada, and almost there's probably 250 different sets of challenges or different sets of experiences. So it's not cookie cutter. We've had to educate our clients and our customers around that. Okay, you need to change the way you package up work. You need to change, you can't, if you want to work with Indigenous communities, you can't say you can't do it in downtown Toronto. If you want to make a difference in the Range in northern Saskatchewan, you can't say, yeah, we'll give you a job in downtown Toronto. You got to find a way to package up the work that can be done in Mannapinagag or Madawaska. You know what I mean? And we've been successful at that. We have people in Eel Ground testing software for LinkedIn out of Los Angeles, which is kind of cool, right? It can be done, but there's lots of barriers. But it can't be done the way they've always done it before. The companies have to change. We have to provide the right training. We have to provide the right connections and help. You provide the training, you provide the opportunity, and you provide the help to take advantage of the opportunity.
That's great, Keith. Thank you so much. I'm going to give Kelsey one chance to answer this question as well.
Yes, awesome. And Keith, I think we're going to have to link up here soon. Offline. What do you think?
Every opportunity is a sales opportunity, Kelsey.
I love it. I'll take it. Oh gosh. No, I'm not too much to add. I echo everything that's said so far. Just a couple different items, I guess, that I just learned along the way. Any wage training subsidies are, awesome. Like those are very helpful to help with, bringing in Indigenous people, getting them through the door. I didn't really even realize before I worked at MUHAR that those even existed. So I just wanted to share that that's been a success for us. Just a second item here. Try to go through them quickly. I realized going through and working through this in the past 3 to 4 years, you can't do it alone, okay? You got to have a whole team, all internally. You all have to be working towards the same goal. Opportunities don't get missed. You cover more ground. The more that you share with other people, and the more that you're all working towards the same goal, the more progress that we make. And I realized that I didn't realize that before, and I'm realizing that now today we all need to be working towards that goal. One item that I wanted to also talk about was self-identification. I know this is a touchy subject, and I know there's a large stigma around regarding self-identification. I grew up thinking that it was negative. And I don't think that anymore. I use this tool for recruitment to identify candidates that have self-identified as Indigenous. So I just wanted to also bring that up to just to share that that was a lesson learned for me, was to start to appreciate these systems that are in place that do help break down those barriers for Indigenous people to get into those roles. Now, I do want to say that, people that we don't use the tool, how do I say this? People that get a role, they do meet the criteria first before we use any type of special equity appointment. So I just wanted to share with everybody that, I'm not ashamed of it. I know everybody has different feelings about it, but it's a tool in place to help us Indigenous peoples. I just wanted to share that, I guess, lesson learned that I learned with everybody. And just one more item here. My last item on this topic is, you can get all these Indigenous people through the door. You can, if we all work together, but you also have to have a culture and a workplace to keep them. And I know that some Keith, you mentioned a little bit about that, and some of us have already talked about that, but, we can work very hard to get, our numbers up, but we also need to create them and maintain that culture that keeps them, welcomed and feel that they have a place with your organization.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kelsey. And thank you everyone for sharing. I know we're getting to our time, getting close to our end time, but I just wanted to share or ask a question that Sean had posed earlier is how can we foster an environment within our communities of playing leapfrog rather than catch up? So how do we look towards software, coding, et cetera, or integrated this technology into our businesses, such as agriculture and energy projects, land and water stewardship, carbon sequestration, become more and more involved with in the coming years. Find the best practice lessons learned and apply to emerging markets, technology opportunities. What worked 10 years ago versus what will be standard in 10 years. 7th generation planning, business and technology integration. I'm not sure who wants to answer that or if anybody has any thoughts and feelings around that question. It's there in the chat box.
Well, I think obviously technology is a big opportunity, right? But it's a long-term play. We talk to communities all across the country that are bringing technology, the first step is we're going to get somebody in run a server data sovereignty, and it comes from outside. Somebody comes in, they hire somebody to take care of it. Well, that's good, but you got to teach your own people how to. We got to get our own young people learning it and being the ones actually doing the work. And it's going to take time. First, you create stuff. As I said, you have to see it to be it. So you bring technology opportunities to kids, and they'll eventually start. This generation has to go back to school to learn it, but the next generation maybe stays in school and learns it and finds opportunities to work. And then once you work in the field, you take opportunities to become entrepreneurs and start your own business. And there's great examples of, Ian Daly's doing some stuff as a IT technology startup, and there's quite a few that are coming, but they're small still. If John Bernard's thing was one of the early examples, and it's taken it's huge now, but it took a long time to grow there. It's going to take time to build these opportunities. But I think you can't rush it. You gotta build the foundational blocks of knowledge and understanding of technology and getting people interested in co-op and working for companies like MB Power, like us, that are doing technology things, and eventually it'll start to grow, right?
Absolutely.
I just had a kind of question on. So I agree 100% on engaging our young people and then bringing those opportunities and kind of learning into that environment. My concern is missing today's opportunity. How do we bring, the attention or the information or what that process might look like? And I guess that's open to anyone if you've got some best practice. But how do we, how do we make sure that we're not missing opportunities? So we're filling in some of those gaps so communities can make really informed decisions today, even though it might be uncomfortable. We're not familiar with this sector, but it's just we've sat on the sidelines for a long time, and sometimes I just look at cannabis. Like, so many of our communities miss that opportunity because they took the cultural approach that we don't believe in drugs. But as soon as it became legal, like, I had hundreds of communities reaching out, like, hey, how do we get involved with this? Like, we missed really what the opportunity was, and government never engaged really that well around that. So that's my question, is how do we bring our communities along so they're not missing those opportunities, even in areas there might not be that great level of knowledge or comfort in?
So Peter, I was talking to Peter and a group of people from the government yesterday about some of this very stuff. There are opportunities. It's not just testing. It's not just code development. There's software and everything. So I agree, Sean. There's the opportunities are there. How do you start? I don't know. There's an answer. I don't know. There's a short answer. I'm pleased to meet you. Where are you from? What community are you from? Or
I'm from Red Pheasant Cree Nation, just west of Battleford, and work with Farm Credit Canada.
Right. I think this is a huge question that there needs to be. I'd love to have this conversation more with you and with other people that are interested in it, is building a plan, but it does have to be a coordinated plan. You know, there's folks like we work with FHQ Developments, which is a tribal council in Regina. And there are places all across the country where some of the nations are really trying to start investing in technology, but it's a multi-step process. I'd be happy to share my information and have a further conversation with you and whoever else wants to be part of it and make connections.
I'll throw my email in the chat there, and if anybody wants to reach out, maybe we can set up a call at some point. I know I didn't expect everybody to have like the perfect answer, but it is something that, as we're looking down the path of whatever the opportunity is, we're missing out on opportunities by humming and hawing and then not sure how to exercise due diligence, like all natural things. Like I wouldn't know how to approach some of these decisions either, but we've got to find tools and pathways for communities to execute at the speed of business. They're very comfortable and trained into executing at the speed of government. That's all we've ever known. We'll wait 10 years for a water plant. How do we change that conversation, right?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think you absolutely have to start. The only sitting still isn't going to help. You're absolutely right. That's fine. The speed of business and what's going to be. Yeah, I think your question was what it would be 10 years from now. Well, we don't know what it's going to be 10 years from now. But you got to be moving to be able to adapt and catch up. So there's a lot of stuff there to unwrap. I think that if there were leaders across the country that were saying, how do we let's get to work on it, I think that would be a wonderful step. Wherever I go, I tell the first thing that any First Nation community should ask for is broadband internet access. We need to have broadband internet access. Should be a human right in every community, because it opens so many doors. It makes okay, I want to train people in technology. Well, the only way to do that is in a lot of these communities is through broadband and getting it there. So it should absolutely be the first thing you ask for.
Connection is currency, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Sorry, guys.
I'd just like to add something there. Sorry, I don't mean to bombard it here. I just wanted to, it sounds like to me, Sean, that you're looking at ways to, be more proactive. And I can speak a little bit to, what I do know about, energy projects and project management here at Edie Power. And I thought I'd just share that while I'm not well versed in that area, I have a few team members here on the call that, that's, their world. But I will say that, what helps us is I know that they do a lot of pre-engagement. So even before a project's even, started or going, I know that they have several processes before, that are in place to engage Indigenous communities before a project's even thought of or in those initial stages. So a team like an Indigenous Affairs team within an NB Power would be a really good place to start and have those conversations of what's coming. What can I get prepared for? What can my community get prepared for? And I just wanted to add that. I don't know if that was helpful or not.
Thank you very much, everyone. I know we could sit for hours and talk about the wonderful things that we can do to, implement Indigenous inclusion and reconciliation in our workplaces. And I really wish that we did have more time. And unfortunately, our time has come to an end. Please feel free to exchange emails in the chat with anyone that you have questions for, or you want to make a connection with. We covered some great topics today with Chief Bernard, and of course this afternoon with our panelists from the different organizations. And I must say that JEDI is truly values our partnerships with the organizations and outside organizations that we deal with on a day-to-day basis for the work that they do with us and for the Indigenous communities. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Stan for any closing remarks. Again, thank you everyone for being here today. And just a reminder that our next session was May 25th at 1 p.m. It's another afternoon session. And then our last session is May 27th. So over to you, Stan, for any closing remarks.
Thank you, Val. And I'd just like to, obviously I'd like to thank again Elder Donna for the opening prayer. And along with the, the closing prayer that we'll probably hear here shortly. I'd also, send out a great thank you to Chief Patricia Bernard. It was, I feel like it's, even as an Indigenous person, it was still a very eye-opening session for myself. And I hope it was a, valuable learning experience for everyone today. And I would also like to thank, our four panelists on the, our four panelists, Peter Seymour from Working MB, Kelsey Bernard from MB Power, Keith Mcintosh with PQA and Plato, and along with Ida from Hayes Farm. We certainly, like Val said, we certainly appreciate all the partnerships, all our funders, including, Government of Canada, Government of New Brunswick, So, and I would like to thank everyone else for joining us today. And I would, I think if Alex is still on, I would ask Alex to say some closing remarks as well.
Well, you did very well, Stan, and I must apologize because I was sort of in and out, but I did see all of the presentations and the last one, and from our friends, and certainly I think that it demonstrates that in some cases we are doing right stuff sometimes. Is interesting from Hay Farms and of course Plato and NB Power, and not to forget the now I've already forgotten the other panelists. I'm sorry. I didn't take any notes, and I'm trying to keep in mind. And I think that partnership does work, and I think that's very important. And if you have any ideas, and do bounce them off anybody here that's in this particular group. And I think that one of the things that hasn't changed much since my days was that the employers are never ready to, I find anyway, they're never ready to accommodate an Indigenous person. I worked out of school, and I worked with the Minister of Indian Affairs and Northern Development in Ottawa, and all I did was carry his briefcase and arrange for his transportation. So I really didn't learn very much. And I think that I was a very shy young man at that time, and things have changed since then. I'm not young anymore, I'm not shy. And I want to thank everybody for participating, and certainly thank Stan for pinch hitting for me this morning, this afternoon, I'm sorry. And it's great to see our staff doing such a fabulous job. And I do like the backdrop that Val and I think that Gwen have. Although I couldn't see Gwen because I think there was too much black there. Maybe she has a tan or something. And thank you, Donna, for participating as usual. Women engagement list was done Delhi.
Awesome, so us.
Okay.
Thank you, Alex. And I guess I just want to jump in really quick. We do have, we did do a draw. We do have two winners for some JEDI swag. In that their two winners are Toria Martin and Diane Wade.
Hey, congratulations. You're awesome swags.
We will just get, we'll probably follow up and get some contact information, and we'll get the JEDI swag mailed out to everyone. And then I think, can we, we'll pass it over to Donna for the closing prayer now.
Okay. All right. Well, Alio, I appreciate it. Yeah, something happened with my computer. I got kicked off for a bit, and I was trying to come back on, but I'm glad I was able to make it back on. I
You
feel
and I
that.
both. That
Yeah,
happened to me.
Palali. Peko muksin. It's always good to see Alex. You know, years ago. Oh shoot, there's somebody. You know, let me put this phone in the other room. Hold on, because I don't know how to turn it off. Yeah.
Modern technology.
Yeah, so I don't want to hang up on them, so I just covered it up. It's a video chat from my grandson. I can always get a hold of him. So I'm just very grateful that when I see Alex, he's been there from the beginning, and it's like that it's like knows the history and up to current time. I feel that that is so important in every organization to have that, you know, and I'm sure there's a few other people that have been here too quite a while. So I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful to be asked today to do this. And by the way, while I have a chance, I want to say to you, Alex, and whoever, that last year when, because of COVID, and when I was invited, and we were all invited to go to do a outdoor movie in Fredericton, I thought that was wonderful. It made everyone feel special. You know, everybody's going through a hard time, even still with this COVID. And so it just gave everyone a chance to just relax. Food was delivered to us in our car, you know, with people with masks on, then they gave us treats, and oh, it was just incredible. I thought whoever planned this was ingenious. So
25th anniversary.
Yes, it's good. It's good for the balance. It really, truly is. You know, we need to balance our lives with seriousness and laughter and everything balanced. So on that note, I'd like to give thanks when we request something in prayer. We're soon. Hagisok, walalik kiskuk tandil mawalik. Ni wada mek nego na dia kwewiek. Walalik ko chinera del go kodira. Walalik ko chimi majuan. Walalik kisok tandil dun wien tas ma amina nego. Tashinu dodiek. Asad ma kisok ka kwimel mashinu listibush. Gidna majik kisok. Tawan das wala. Walalik kisok. How chibunuk ta amishan liok to nadil. Achicha mishki pudan leini nadil. Nadil na nagos ilu niasad. Walalik kiskuk tandil mawaliek. Ni wadamek. Ni wadamek tandil yak kwe nego. Tangilo kuguso ana akidaso ambegisid wiego. Walaliek. Ha kades nuk ta amishan liok to nadil. Achicha mishevi tan leini nadil. Walal gu jumkas way to ma ambegisota. Walali gu chitandil min das ma amina nego. Walali gu chitangilo kuguso an akidaso ambegisid wiego. Mi wadamek. Walali. Ha hetkas nuk. Cham shaliok to nadil. Nadil dana busedon wa asid. Nadil dan sa wat kemiskis na igay mo dio nakto asid amo. Walalik nego na dia kwewiek. Unemon na pasagedo nego a kwewiek a ilo kwewiek. Walalik kisko go chikelo kuguso ana akidaso ambegis duwiego. Mi wadamek walalik. Ho. Ha o adno cham shaliok to nadil. A cham shwabek mo na lewi nadil. Walalik kisko tanda mawalik. Walalik go chikelo kuguso an akidaso an. Wala go chira kelo kompisun pasquar vi tashinu do de gan tilmina ha kamla mina wala ali ha gishna ma ami ko wala ali go chikisku tanda mawali wala ali tanda liga mu ka ami ga pala ana wala ali go chit sangwan kunda minishko we sis sang sat ko dan no do de go chima jwan wala ali gishna ma ami ko ha no all my relations aho.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Elder Donna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was honored.
And to our guests today, Chief Bernard, and our panelists. Wonderful content, and thank you for sharing your stories. And my colleagues and all the participants, thank you for being here today. Like I said before, our next session is May 25th, so please feel free to come back and join us.
Yes.
And the third session will be on the 27th.
See you all then.
So everyone have a nice evening.
Take care. See everyone next week.
Yeah, update.
Namaltes.
Oh.